Hello, I'm Rita Dragonette, a Chicago-born and based author and member of the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, and I'm very pleased to host this edition of Quarantine Classics. The book that I'm going to be reading from today is not typically considered to be a Chicago book. It is The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham, but it is indeed essentially about a Gold Coast family. The book was published in 1944. This particular book was purchased in 1968, which you may not be surprised by when you see the condition of the jacket. This was my first grown-up hardcover book. I asked for it for Christmas because I knew this was a story that I was going to want to read over and over again as long as I lived. Now, the story is set in that very rich time frame post-World War I, when so many survivors were coming back and trying to acclimate into their former lives. And they were grappling, looking for meaning, and finding that very likely they were going to have to redefine what that meant for themselves. Larry Jarrell is a character that the narrator tells us is a very religious man who does not believe in God. Now, I remember reading that as a very young girl, grappling with those issues myself and thinking, oh, I had no idea you could actually be that. And I have to admit that I did use that phrase to define myself for a number of years. Today, we would call Larry spiritual. The excerpt that I'm going to read from you takes place when the narrator, who is an older gentleman from London, has come into town to visit the Chicago Gold Coast family. And he has met Larry at a party at their house the night before and found him perfectly pleasant but unremarkable. In this scene, the narrator realizes that he is very interesting indeed. Now, pay attention to the scene as I read it and see if you can figure out where the setting is, and we'll talk about it later. My club possessed a good library, and I stopped in early. Larry was seated in a big leather chair. He was the last person I should have expected to find in such a place. He was reading William James' Principles of Psychology. It is, of course, an exceedingly readable book, but it is not the sort that I would have expected to see in the hands of a very young man, an aviator who had been dancing until 5 in the morning. "Why are you reading this?" I asked. "I'm very ignorant." "You're also very young," I smiled. He did not speak for so long a time that I began to find the silence awkward, and I was on the point of leaving, but I had a feeling he wanted to say something. When he began to speak, it was as though he continued the conversation without awareness of that long silence. "When I came back from France, they all wanted me to go back to college," he said. "But after what I'd been through, I felt I couldn't. They wouldn't have liked me. And I didn't want to act a part I didn't feel. And I didn't think the instructors would teach me the sort of things that I wanted to know." "Of course, this is no business of mine," I said, "but I'm not convinced you're right. I had the chance to go to Cambridge as my brothers had, but I refused it. I wanted to go out into the world. I've always regretted it. I think it would have saved me a lot of mistakes. You waste a lot of time going down blind alleys if you have no one to lead you." "You may be right," Larry said. "I don't mind if I make mistakes. It may be that in one of the blind alleys I may find something to my purpose." "What is your purpose?" He hesitated a moment. "That's just it. I don't quite know it yet." "Well, it appears you've got the offer of a very good job. A wonderful job. Are you going to take it?" "I don't think so." "Why not?" "I don't want to." I was butting into an affair that was no concern of mine, but I had a notion that just because I was a stranger from a foreign country, Larry was not disinclined to talk to me about it. "What do you want to do?" He gave me his radiant, fascinating smile. "Loaf," he said. I had to laugh. "I shouldn't have thought Chicago the best place in the world to do that," I said. "Anyhow, I'll leave you to your reading. I want to have a look at the Yale Quarterly." When I left the library, Larry was still absorbed in his book. I lunched by myself at the club, and since it was quiet in the library, went back there to smoke my cigar and idle an hour or two away, reading and writing letters. I was surprised to see Larry still immersed in his book. He looked as if He hadn't moved since I left him. He was still there about 4 when I went away. I was struck by his evident power of concentration. He had neither noticed me go nor come. I had various things to do during the afternoon and did not get back to the Blackstone till it was time to change for the dinner party I was going to. On my way, I was seized with an impulse of curiosity. I dropped into the club once more and went to the library. There were quite a number of people there then, reading papers and whatnot. Larry was still sitting in the same chair, intent on the same book. Odd. Well, I hope this scene has inspired the same kind of curiosity in you to check out this story. I do feel that Larry's journey to meaning is very resonant with journeys we may all be on right now after what we've all been through, particularly as we think about the future. Now, in terms of the setting, it's a club. It's near South because it's near the Blackstone. There's the Yale Quarterly, and there are leather chairs and an eclectic array of books. My thought is that it's the Union League Club of Chicago. What do you think? Email me at this post. Meanwhile, enjoy The Razor's Edge.